Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to our Grow Native workshop. We're so excited to have you all here with us today. Thank you for taking the time out of your Thursday evening to join us. I'm going to share my screen here and we'll start with our introductions. So my name is Nessa Frechette and I'm the manager of scientific programs at Friends of Biona Wetlands. And our big focus is obviously all about Biona and getting the wetlands restored. But our other focus is on making sure that folks can take restoration home with them and do restoration in their own yards or on their patios and balconies, because that is the key to making Los Angeles truly biodiverse and helping to fight climate change and habitat loss and all the different challenges that we're facing as a community. And so that's how we've broadened our horizons, and we're working on that. And we're so glad that you're here to join us. And this is Lisa Fimiani, my inspiration for getting involved in native plants. And she can talk about herself. Oh, are you muted, Lisa?
I unmuted myself.
Okay, good.
Well, the more I get into native plants, the more I want to be completely consumed with them. I am finding that there's always something to learn. There's always something magical happening in a native plant garden. And hopefully today you're going to get some pointers on what you can do in your garden, whether it's a backyard or a front yard, or even just a patio where you have pots and you want to have some native plants. And we can give you some tips on how to do that.
Absolutely. And Lisa is a master gardener, and she works at Loyola Marymount with the Center for Urban Resilience, and they are pioneering a bunch of different stuff involved with native plants and pushing Los Angeles City to use native plant palettes throughout. So we don't know what we would do without you, Lisa. So thank you so much for all your hard work.
Thank you.
And let's talk about what folks can do at home. So first of all, let's give an introduction. So what are native plants? We hear this question a lot. So native, there's a couple of different definitions that folks use. But first of all, they occurred before European settlement, and they've been evolving here in California in our floristic province for thousands of years. These were the plants that the original Californians depended on. So the native Tongva near the Biona wetlands and all of the other Native Americans that lived in the area. These are the plants that were the foundation of their livelihood. So not just for food, but also for shelter. So all of those plants we still want to be incorporated into our lives today. And these plants co-evolved with the animals and the fungi and the microbes that are also present here. They have complex relationships. They rely on each other. They have their own ecosystems that have evolved over the time. And in some cases, they can't survive without each other. So it's important to keep those ecosystems intact. So why do we want to grow native plants? For a number of reasons. For some selfish reasons, that you'll save money, you'll save time. They take less water. You don't need to treat them with fertilizer. You don't need to use pesticides, and you will spend far less time caring for your yard, and you'll have more time to relax. For the less selfish reasons, you are doing something for the environment that is invaluable. The wildlife will thank you every day. By being present in your yard, by making your yard alive and beautiful and full of nature. And that is a gift. So once you really get to see the difference between a yard that's truly native and has a high percentage of native plants compared to a yard that's full of plants that came from another country that are not recognized by our wildlife, you'll see the difference. And it's just truly incredible to be a part of a native garden where there's bees buzzing by, you'll have butterflies, you'll have insects, you'll have birds, reptiles, mammals, everything will be in that yard compared to a more exotic yard. They're also more beautiful, in my opinion. So we focus a lot on wildlife here in both of our organizations, and habitat loss is the #1 threat against wildlife. And we can combat that by planting native habitats in our yards. Also, there are some other major issues. Urbanization adds to habitat loss. Also, the invasion of exotic plants, mostly weeds like mustard, crown daisy, castor bean, ice plant. These are the sorts of things that Europeans brought with them to serve different purposes, either for agricultural reasons, supposed soil erosion reasons, or just accidentally they hitched a ride on something else. And those things have harmed wildlife populations. Also, cats, keep your cats indoors. They are one of the #1 threats to native birds, unfortunately. If you have to let your cat outdoor, they make cute little bibs that you can put on them, and then it prevents them from pouncing on our native wildlife. So I recommend that. And then, of course, climate change is a huge issue, but we can fight that too with native plants. And pesticides and rodenticides. I'm sure Lisa will talk a little bit more later about this, as this is her one of her passion projects. So building your native garden will combat habitat loss and fight climate change. It's also going to provide water and shelter for wildlife. So birds that are traveling through, they're migrating through, they need places to stop and rest, refuel. And then sometimes you'll even have birds that nest in your backyard, and you'll be contributing to a population increase. How cool is that? And big changes truly are possible. So it takes some work ethic, but it's truly incredible what can be achieved. If you have the space, you can make it happen. So I'm just going to click through a few garden examples to give us some eye candy to inspire us for the rest of our talk here. Native gardens come in all shapes, sizes, colors, you name it. They're truly beautiful. You can even make them into a parkway right along the street. It's a great place to have a native garden. And here are some images of Lisa's garden. Lisa, do you want to talk about your garden?
Oh, sure. I've been living in my house in Mar Vista for about 8 years now, and every year I try different things. In this image, you're seeing some elegant Clarkia, some branching Phacelia, obviously the California poppies, and some sunflowers that came up from bird seed. I was feeding the birds, and I just let them go because I thought this is going to be really interesting to see what happens. And it's been fun to watch the birds not only pick at the seed pods when they become ripe, but they eat parts of the leaves of the sunflower plant. And I looked that up on the internet because I had never seen that before. And apparently it's quite common. They find obviously nutrients in those leaves. You know, the textures, the colors, and the fragrances of native plants really are unique to California. I mean, look at the delicacy of the branching Phacelia blossoms next to the poppies. And you can almost tell that it's a warm summer day because the poppies are almost fully open. And if it was a cold day, they would close up. And I've had people say to me, oh my God, my poppies are dying. I don't understand on a cold day. And I say, oh no, they're conserving energy because there's no need to be open because there's no sun, and they probably won't attract any insects. The insects are also hanging out somewhere, just conserving energy. This is a California lilac or ceanothus bush in my front yard, and I really love that bush. Every year it surprises me. Last year I had like a bumper crop of blossoms. This year, not so much. We'll see what next spring brings. And if you look in the lower right-hand corner, you can see yellow-eyed grass, which is one of my new favorite native plants. The yellow-eyed grasses and the blue-eyed grasses are actually not grasses. They are in the iris family. And this is very common with ornamental plants, even with natives. People use common names, and I'm very guilty of doing that, and I'm fine with it. You talk to purists, native plant purists, and they always want to refer to plants by their genus and species names. And I do, and I make sure that my lists are accurate, but I like to use the common names too. Oh, and in the front is a California fuchsia, which isn't in bloom yet. Here's the ceanothus. You can see the kind of the soft green. Look at those beautiful blossoms, and they attract all kinds of beneficial insects. I haven't used pesticides since I moved in, and I will never again use pesticides. The only thing I will treat for are Argentine ants, and that's because they do a lot of damage to plants, unfortunately. But the bees, the bee flies, the hover flies, the wasps, the moths, they're all good for the garden, and they're fun to watch. And as you can see, it's a cross section of colors and textures. I've also got bird baths. I always have water out for my birds, and bird feeders. You can see some of the bird feeders. I'm renting a house, so I don't have access to a really good like electrical system outdoors. If I did, I probably would put in a water feature with moving water of some kind.
Awesome, Lisa. Thank you. So even if you don't have a yard, you can still have a wonderful native garden using containers. And there are, we'll talk about native plants that are suitable for containers later. We have some instructions for that. And there's all kinds of photos on the internet of people successfully using native plants in containers. And Lisa, you have your own successes with that.
Yes, I in my backyard and a patio area, I have some savory on the left, native savory. I have the dog violets that are so beautiful, and they have a delicious, very faint fragrance. And then on the right, I have a lemonade berry. And I'm kind of watching that. I think I'm going to get it in the ground pretty soon because it's not real happy in a pot. But as you can see, the dogwood, the dog violets are doing great, and so are the savories. And they also have a wonderful fragrance. Here's yarrow on the left, and then I'm trying a manzanita in a pot. I'm going to see how it does. As you can see, there's a lot of light green leaves. That shows it's been growing. That's a good sign. So I keep an eye on them. I watch to see that they're not getting too much sun. The trick with plants and pots is if you get too much sun, you can bake the roots and the root ball. And once you do that, you kind of kiss the plant goodbye. So I have actually a shade cloth over my patio area, and I just try to temper that sun when it gets really strong during the summer months.
That's a good point. I have a few manzanitas in pots, and they're doing really well. Yeah, I'm recently obsessed with manzanitas, so I recommend it. So to help you sort through all of the different plants and information that we're providing here today, we have 5 different handouts for you. Over on the panel, go to handouts. You can see that there are 5. You can download them. If for some reason the download doesn't work for you, just email me after the webinar and I can send them to you individually. So we have a DIY guide, a do-it-yourself native garden guide that will help direct you to assess your site, plan what plants you're going to use, how to install them, where to buy them, the whole 9 yards. That is very helpful with lots of great links and stuff. And that was created with the help of a bunch of different environmentalists and nonprofit organizations that came together in partnership with the El Segundo Blue Butterfly Coalition. So that's a really wonderful resource. There's also a book, a downloadable book essentially, that of resources that Lisa put together, that has everything you'll ever want to know about native plants, wildlife, resources on trees. Is there anything else you want to say about that, Lisa?
Just that, you know, it's a subjective list. It's a list of books that I've read that inspired me, that did something to make me really aware of what I was reading about, whether it would be birds or plants or trees or insects. And I also would consult with experts and avid birders, and I would say, what do you think about that book? And they would say, you know, that one, it actually captures what you need to know about that particular plant or that particular insect or bird. So it's just a subjective list, but you know, if you want to get started and you're like, don't even know where to start, and there's so much out there, these are well-regarded books. And I wouldn't recommend them if I thought you were going to waste any time reading them. I think you're going to want them on your shelves and refer back to them on a regular basis.
Yeah, I definitely recommend investing in a couple of books to inspire you, to teach you about the plants, and to help you design your garden. And also with maintenance, there's lots of great information on maintaining a native garden, which is different than maintaining a non-native garden. So it's less work, but you do have to learn a little bit about the timing of when you should go out and deadhead and prune and things like that, and when you shouldn't water. So just keep that in mind. And then another great resource that we put together is a list of plants that we recommend. So that's under GN Plant List version 3. So this is our third version of this list. It gets bigger every time, obviously, because we love so many plants. And it's a quick reference guide for different sizes of plants, different categories, down from succulents and grasses to very large trees, large shrubs and trees, and it'll tell you what sun preference it has, what kind of water preference it has, if it can tolerate sandy or clay soils, if you can grow it in a container, and if it's evergreen. So we do recommend when you plant and design your garden that you have what we like to call an evergreen backbone, where you have about 70 to 80% evergreen plants, and you don't want to have all your deciduous plants on one side and all your evergreen plants on the other side. You want to make sure that you're mixing them together so you have a nice green background, and then you have the splashes from your deciduous trees. And something that is super helpful with figuring out what to plant in your area is a website called calscape.org, where you can just put in your address and it will tell you all of the plants in your area that are native to your area, so that you can maximize the likelihood of planting plants that will survive and do really well. And it'll tell you more information than you ever thought possible about those plants to help you to learn about them, how big they're going to grow, what they need, what wildlife they attract, and what plants they are companioned with out in the wild, so you can create a nice community. The Theodore Payne Foundation is also referenced in this list of plants, and that's where we get the information on what plants do well in containers. And it provides helpful summaries, and it helps you to figure out, it has great pictures, and figure out if that's the plant for you. So here's an example of a calscape.org plant search. So I typed in my zip code and I got 486 plants native to my area. And it's sorted by trees, shrubs, perennials, annuals, etc., all the way down to very easy. So anybody can be a native gardener. I promise you. If you're nervous about this, you're not ready to make the commitment, just pick a small area to start with. You don't have to go all out, or you could just start with some potted plants. You know, don't overwhelm yourself. Pick a few that you really like and try it out first if you're not 100% ready to rip out your whole lawn and start fresh, right? So go easy on yourself. And then here are some examples of some of our favorite books. So again, we really recommend that you pick up a couple of books. when I took my first class at Theodore Payne Foundation, they said California native plants for the garden was like the Bible of native plants. And I'd have to agree. It's very thorough. So that's a really great place to start. But all of these other books have wonderful descriptions of native plants, and they also help you with some design elements. Is there any other books that you wanted to spotlight, Lisa?
No, I don't think so. I think these are a great start.
Wonderful. All right, so don't forget about the DIY guide. And if you forget to download it, you can get it off of the website at bionafriends.org/grownative. So this will help you assess your site. Or if you decide, you know, this is way too much for me, I want to go native, but I don't want to do so much work, you can hire some help. And so there's a list in the handouts called Native Garden Contractors, and they will help you plan your site and maintain your site if that's the route that you choose. So if you want to do it yourself, use this guide. It will help you understand your site and how it's unique, help you understand the soil on your site, where does your water go. You have to start to pay attention to where is the sun on my yard. Do I only get full sun in one area, or do I actually get part sun everywhere? Do I have no places with shade? Those are the sorts of things you're going to want to look into. And then you'll use the plant list and the other resources we've described to become familiar with plants, fall in love with some plants, and develop your plant palette or your list of all your favorite plants that you want to use. And then you'll start to create a layout of your yard, accompanied with this guide will help you figure that out. And then you create a shopping list based on your plants. And one thing you want to look at is plants that go together. So that could be a few different things. It could be plants that have the same water, soil, and sun preference. Those go together in the physical way. Or you could have plants that go together because they are companion plants, or they're in a similar community or ecosystem. They could be, you could think about it from a design perspective. Do they go together because of their colors, their textures, the way that you layer them with tall plants and low plants and medium all mixed up together so that it looks really aesthetically pleasing. Bloom times and seasons, if you want to get really serious about it so that you have something blooming all year long, then you need to find something that blooms in the winter, the spring, the summer, and the fall, which there totally is. You can have a garden that blooms all year long as you plant something that blooms each season. And we talked a little bit about the evergreen background or backbone. So I just want to give a few, or do you have anything to add to that, Lisa, before we move on to some plant communities? Okay.
You've got it.
So I just wanted to give a few examples of some plant communities. So coastal sage scrub is a plant community that is really common in our area. This kind of community might have coast live oak, as well as lemonade berry and laurel sumac, manzanita, ceanothus, mallows, and sages, snapdragons, buckwheats, and monkey flower, needlegrass, verbena, grape, yarrow, and even some agave, dudleya, and stonecrop, which are cacti and succulents. So even in just what we think of as whatever's growing on the side of the mountain when you're driving down the Pacific Coast Highway is full of diversity, and you can incorporate that into your yard. An oak woodland. Maybe you want to have an oak woodland in your yard. And this would also involve oak trees, maybe a California buckeye, western redbud, which is a deciduous tree, but is absolutely stunningly gorgeous with bright pink flowers during its bloom period. Toyon, which they call, what is it? The Hollywood tree that's growing all in the Santa Monica Mountains.
Christmasberry tree.
And Christmasberry, right, that too. Elderberry, ryegrass, fescues and ferns, monkey flower, manzanita again, currants and gooseberry, snowberry, hummingbird sage, one of my favorites, and alum root. So in oak woodland, you have to also deal with shade under oak trees. So if you're going to have a nice, beautiful, stately oak tree in your yard, you want to look for plants that can handle the shade under oaks, which there are definitely plants for that. So if you have a house that's like really shady, don't worry, there's plants for that too. And a riparian garden. So we really encourage folks to incorporate a rain garden into their yard. We're going to probably have a low rain year with the La Nina season coming up, and we're probably going to have another drought in the next near future. And so that's an even better reason to take advantage of the rain on your yard when it happens by incorporating a rain garden. And so we highly recommend that, and you also get some really cool plants out of the situation. So you might use elderberry, mahogany, aspen, or willow, grasses like sedge, fescue, and rush, or lilies, California wild rose and grape, ferns and irises, ceanothus, honeysuckle, currants, and scarlet monkey flower. So there are many, this is just 3, there are many other types of plant communities throughout California, including all of those that are listed here. And you don't have to just have one community in your yard. You can have multiple. So if you have an area in your yard where all of the water seems to flow, that would probably be a good place to put your rain garden, and you can have your riparian or wetland plants there. And then on your drier hillside, you can have a different type of community, and you can, if you really like succulents and cacti, then you can have a desert community. So there's really lots of options, and you can mix it up. A few more design hints. Again, know where your water flows and incorporate a rain garden if possible. Plant in clusters and layers rather than one of everything, like a kid in a candy shop, like I did when I first started getting in native plants. And keep water-loving plants together. Some drought-tolerant plants don't like summer water, so you want to make sure that plants that like to be left alone, like oak trees, once they're very established, they don't like to get summer water. I think ceanothus is like that sometimes as well. And all of that information will be on Calscape or Theodore Payne, so you will not be left in the dark on that information. Just keep that in mind. And if you have if you want to keep some of your exotic plants that you really like, which is totally okay, we just encourage that you maximize biodiversity by having at least 70% native plants in your yard. Then if you're going to keep your rose bushes or something else that you really love that's not native, make sure that you're not putting something drought tolerant right next to it, because that'll be really hard to deal with water rise. So keep your water loving plants together. If you're going to have a vegetable garden, make sure that's not next to your drought tolerant plants, those sorts of things. So just keep that in mind when you're planning your layout. And that's what I have. So there's a question panel, question section over on the side as well. So please feel free to ask us questions, and we'll answer them to the best of our ability. Look through the handouts, and we'll hang out while you think of some questions. And if you are working on a list of plant lists and you really want us to check it out, you can email us and we will give you some feedback. You want to talk about anything, Lisa?
Well, what I'm doing right now is I'm typing something in the chat for everyone to look up if they'd like. The first thing I'm going to submit is a link to the Biodiversity LA website. This has been a project that my center has been involved in. We've been on panels, the mayor and Councilman Koretz, who's very big on this. And you're going to learn a lot from this site, just how important LA is as a biodiversity hotspot. And the other site that I'm going to share is a new feature that my center has made available, and that is the LA tree canopy data viewer. And we designed that in partnership with Tree People and some other groups. And it's a fantastic new tool to assess right down to your home, your parcel level, the percentage of trees and the percentage of plants and the possibilities of adding more trees, more tree canopy, because we're finding that, and obviously with all these fires, the more we can bring back tree canopies, the better. So that's a site that you might want to go poke around and check. And you can download it, the information for free. It's gotten such great response already that we're going to update the maps. I guess the last time it was updated was within the last 5 years. We obviously have to update it more often. So we're looking for more funding to cover that.
Thank you, Lisa.
And of course, the last link I'll put up that you've already provided, Nessa, is our Grow Native site, which you have put together beautifully. And I want to commend you for all the rich resources you've made available, because this can be overwhelming to someone who is just starting out for the first time. And don't be afraid. There's so many people out there and so many organizations that are willing to help you. And we just want to see LA become a lot more green and become the potential hotspot that we know it can be, despite the fact that it's the second largest city in the country. And my goal is to encourage all the organizations in LA to green up LA in time for the 2028 Olympics. I mean, it's a nice kind of artificial goal for the city to try to get all this stuff done by then. And I think we can do it. And I would like to see more organizations work on it. And each one of you can work on it in your own way, in your own gardens, at your places of work, at your schools, even though right now with the COVID-19 restrictions, it's been hard, but they'll lift and we're going to be able to get back in the gardens again. So that would be my advice. Do we have no questions from our group?
No, we have some questions now. Yeah.
Then I'm going to stop talking.
No, that's okay. We've got lots of time. So the first question was, will we send out the presentation? And the answer is yes. So it's being recorded, and once it's processed, I will share it with everybody. And it'll be accessible on YouTube, so you can share it with friends or family. And I have an interesting question. Do you know of any native plants that can be used as to dye yarn, or where this information can be found? What do you think, Lisa?
I am sure that you can do that. The Native Americans did it. And boy, that's a great question. We're gonna have to do some research on that, because, off the top of my head, I can't think of any books other than Jim Adams' book on medicinal plants of the West. Also, the book Tending the Wild has a lot of information in there about how Native Americans use native plants. And I'm sure there's a section in that book on how they would use plants to dye clothing and leather and so on. So yeah, we'll do some more research on that for you. Great question.
Can you recommend a plant that could cascade down a wall, like a prostrate rosemary? I'm interested in manzanita and ceanothus for this purpose, but also open to other suggestions.
Chamise would be a fantastic plant. There's two versions, one that grows kind of tall like a bush, and one is a prostrate version. Also, Twin Peaks, Pigeon Point, the buckwheats you can use. No, they're coyote brush. I'm sorry, and they will cascade down a wall and look absolutely gorgeous, especially when they're blooming. So definitely those plants would do great and would stay green all year round as well.
In addition to the manzanita and ceanothus, those are still two great options.
They are. It's hard to train a manzanita to go down a wall, but if you can do it, I mean, you of course you just keep, trimming the ends that are growing away from the wall and just keep training it to go back to the wall, and it should work just fine.
Wonderful. Okay, you're gonna love this question, Lisa. I've been trying to grow a native garden at my beachside home with 50% success. I am tempted to amend the sand because it is just sand, no soil at all, but have been advised by native plant experts to not amend. But if I don't water regularly, the plants won't survive.
So that is an interesting question. Well, if you're using the plants that are used to being in sand, you probably don't have to amend. But if you're worried about leaving the plants for any length of time and you're not going to be able to water them, you could add some soil to the plant as you're planting it, but I wouldn't be adding soil on a regular basis, maybe just to the root ball. And then the plant will go down deep to look for water as the water passes through the sand very quickly. What do you think, Nessa?
Well, she added some additional details that the goal is not to irrigate very much, and did ask if she could add some soil, and that she is only using beach plants. So she's already planting for success by using local plants, which is great. So it just seems like you have a really sandy site that's being a little bit difficult. And I guess I wonder how long have are some, like, how established are some of these plants? Are they still getting established, or are they have they been there for a couple years and you thought that they were going to be okay, and then all of a sudden they gave up on you? If they're still getting started, then I would keep trying. And then if they've been established and then they're not surviving, then that sounds like more of an issue with the not enough groundwater nearby, and so they're not really tapping into anything. They do well for 6 months and then dry up and die. The grasses are working better now, though. Yeah.
Huh.
That's tough. I have to think about that one for a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's some folks, you're gonna have a tough site. So let us spend a little time thinking about that one, and I will get back to you. Try to come up with some more tips. All right, let's see here. Is coffee berry a good hedge, and is it fast growing? What can I expect in height and width near Westchester, Playa Vista?
It's a slow growing plant. It's not as slow as an oak tree, but it's not a fast growing. I would recommend cherry. I'm just discovering how amazing our native cherry bushes can grow, and they can grow very fast. You can also train them to cover a wall. So they're kind of like a native ficus bush, you know, they just go crazy. And once they get established, and you can train them, and they stay evergreen. And then of course they produce cherries, which will draw in the birds. I just
Great
realized
question.
that you can see the questions, I can't.
Oh,
Which is
is
fine.
that,
I'm glad you're calling them out.
that's, so you don't have it on your side panel, huh?
I don't know why, but I do not. I can only see what I posted.
We'll fix that next time. Okay.
Don't worry.
Here's a great question. Besides Theodore Payne, can you recommend any other resources? Oh, in the San Fernando Valley. That's a tough one. There are a whole list of other nurseries on the Grow Native website, and we're going to add 2 more. However, they are both on the west side. The San Fernando Valley, I live there, so I feel your pain. Theodore Payne is my favorite. If you want to take a lovely drive to, what is the one in Simi Valley? Oh, well, that's an even
That's
lovelier
going south.
drive. But,
yes, a lovely long drive.
that is definitely a fun adventure. The one I'm thinking about, it's not what's just Moore Park? Is it Moore Park?
I'm not sure which one you're
Um,
talking about there.
the
Well, you know, the California Native Plant Society has an annual sale, and they're coming up right now, October and November. Even with COVID-19, a lot of these nurseries are going to have their annual fall sales. And California Native Plant Society usually has a sale at the Sepulveda Basin. There's a nursery there that's not open all the time, but it is open for this sale. So you can get native plants there, and you can just Google Sepulveda native plant sale, and it should come right up. But other than Theodore Payne on the west side, in the valley, this is one of the issues we're all dealing with, is that native plants are not being sold in bulk at our box stores like Home Depot and Lowe's and the other stores that have been traditionally selling the ornamental water guzzling non-native plants that look pretty but don't last, and they don't really provide any ecosystem services for the wildlife.
So I added a link in the chat box to the Matilaha Nursery, which is in Moore Park. This
That's right.
commenter is
Yeah.
in Calabasas, so that actually may not be too far for you. The great thing about that place is the prices are pretty good, and they have a really big selection. The downside is that they don't have signage the way that Theodore Payne does. Theodore Payne is great for beginners who don't know what they want, and for people who want to shop on their own, because they have great signage that tells you so many details about the plant. If you go to the Matilaha Nursery, the folks there are very nice and they'll help you find what you're looking for, but it's not as easy to just, unless you know the plants and you can spot them, they just don't have the signage. So that's the only downside there, but the prices are pretty good. So I recommend that. Also, for some reason, your links that you posted earlier, Lisa, only went to me, which is not helpful.
I just noticed that.
Yeah,
I just noticed.
I pre-posted them, but
went to you. So you're forwarding them to everyone. I don't have the option. I can only go to you or presenters or organizers and panelists.
You don't have the option for entire audience when you on the drop down? Oh my gosh. Okay, I'm so sorry about that.
That's okay.
Somebody else recommended
and you fixed it.
Yeah. San Marcos Growers. Do you know that one, Lisa?
Yeah, they're good. I've heard of them, and I've known people who've gotten plants from them.
Okay. So that's another option. Can you recommend any natives that will grow in a wide, shallow container about 30 inches wide and 8 inches deep?
Stone crop.
So succulents. You could try, I'm thinking of some stuff that maybe yarrow. I've grown it successfully in some pretty shallow containers. Some grasses. You'll have to water more frequently because it's such a shallow container, but some grasses might do okay. Some perhaps alum root. Could try that. So that stuff will spread out over time. You could plant several of them, like several small ones to kind of fill your container quickly, and then they'll spread out. Anything that stays small, you could try too. There's, depending on where you are, there's the sea thrift, the little pink puffball one. You know what I'm talking about, Lisa? Is that what it's called? Sea thrift is an option as well. Green Thumb seems to have some, so that's true. Green Thumb and Armstrong Nursery, they do sometimes have some okay selections. You might have to go looking for them or ask them. I would also recommend if those are nurseries that you go to a lot, you should demand that they carry more native plants. Say, I patronize your establishment and I want native plants, and encourage them to carry more native plants, because until people know what they are and find them, we're not going to get this process continuing. Here's another interesting nursery. Moosa Creek will deliver if you pre-order. Moosa Creek, I've never heard of that one.
Are they in Malibu? Does it say? Did the person say?
No. Could Google it.
How do you
Moosa
spell
Creek
it?
Nursery. Moosa.
I've never heard of them. I'm gonna write them down. Wow.
I love when we're teaching people, but instead we learn more. That's so fun. Oh, it's also near San Marcos Escondido, so it's south.
Okay.
I'm impressed that they will deliver that far. There are a few other nurseries that deliver. I don't remember what they are, but it lists on our website which ones deliver, so you can look at that as well.
Tree of Life will deliver.
Right. Some have minimums, some don't. I think Las Colitas will deliver one plant to you, but the more plants that you order, the cheaper it gets. So keep that in mind. But yeah, Las Colitas is a great one to order from. Here is someone who just purchased 2 types of manzanitas today at Armstrong, and they also had ceanothus. That is wonderful.
It is.
That is very encouraging. Is milkweed for monarchs native to Southern California? Yes, the narrow-leaf milkweed is the preferred milkweed for planting for our monarchs, because that's the native species that blooms at the right time. Though there are some other species of milkweed. Lisa, do you want to talk about that at all?
Well, there's the South American that is sold regularly at Home Depot and even Marina Garden Center and some of the other garden centers. And that's the one that you see either all yellow flowers or orange and yellow or red and yellow. And it's okay. The problem is it's like serving the monarchs ice cream and candy when they really need the narrowleaf milkweed or the showy milkweed, the native milkweeds native to Southern California, because that helps build their immune system, and it creates the poison that protects them from birds eating them. The birds can actually smell if they don't have enough of that poison in them, and they'll eat them. And when they're dining on just that non-native South American milkweed, unfortunately, and they'll go to it. It drives me crazy. I have beautiful narrowleaf milkweed in my front yard right now, green as can be, and the monarchs in my neighborhood are going to my neighbor across the street who has the yellow milkweed. Drives me crazy. But what can you do? Hopefully they'll come over and lay a few eggs on mine, and those caterpillars will get nice and strong. But yes, there is more than one native milkweed. And you're going to see a lot of ads for milkweed that's they're native to the East Coast. And they're okay too, but you just try to stay with the Western state milkweed.
Yeah, absolutely. Because there are different groups of monarchs that migrate to different areas, and they have different time schedules. And so we're just trying to keep them on track, considering how climate change is going to change plenty of things for us that we don't need to add to that. The native milkweed, so the narrowleaf milkweed has pinkish white flowers.
Yes.
What about the showy milkweed, Lisa?
That's kind of a yellow, white and pink flower as well, but it's a completely different shape. It's a much bigger blossom, where the narrowleaf are tiny little blossoms.
These have been really wonderful questions.
I want to thank everyone for joining us. You know, if you've taken anything away from this, just know that what you're doing is making a difference, not only in your community, but in the world. The articles that I've been reading and some of the references we've shared with you are stating that there are catastrophic things going on worldwide. And I'm not an alarmist, and neither is Nessa. She's a scientist. But what we're witnessing in this day and age in our lifetime is the acceleration of processes that are eliminating species. And without finger pointing, without getting political, the most important thing we can do is provide habitat for wildlife and do as much as we can to encourage life and the balance of life around us. And there, as Nessa started out this session, there are so many pluses to using the native plants that are native to this area. The wildlife thrives and we have beautiful things to look at. We reduce the cost of managing our gardens, but it's going to take some education, especially with the mow and blow gardeners. They only know one way and they've got to be retrained. So do these big box stores. And we're trying to do it in our own ways without coming across as screaming maniacs, because we don't want to alienate people. You know, people who come to me and say, oh, I want to put in a native garden, but I love my rose bushes. And I say, keep the rose bushes, of course, enjoy them. But around them, put in, for every non-native plant that dies, put in a native plant. Reduce your lawn footprint. Put in little cottage gardens. Put in some DG so the water can permeate down to the aquifers. Do what you can in small baby steps, and it's going to make a huge difference. Scientists years ago told me that, oh no, you need huge swatches of natural land for wildlife to thrive. They're being proven wrong every day. Our gardens in our yards, in our neighborhoods are just as important as wide open spaces. And your garden is a living environment for all kinds of species. Something that Nessa didn't mention, but it is on some of our reference documents, is you can sign up for eBird, you can sign up for iNaturalist, you can post photos of things you see in your yard, and experts will help you ID them. There's all kinds of resources out there for you to explore and understand your garden. And it's probably the best part of this day and age that we live in, that we have all this information at our fingertips. Now go do something with it. Don't just sit on it and read it and absorb it, on your computer. Go out and actually utilize the information, and it's going to make such a difference.
Absolutely. Bravo to that. And once you get started, you're going to be in love with it, and you're going to be so glad that you did it. Once you realize how much wildlife is going to come visit you now that you've transitioned over to mostly native plants, that will be wonderful. Yeah, you're going to love it. Someone thanked us for the encouragement. So thank you, Lisa, for your positive message. Very important. So we have a question about a specific, I think this is a grass. Yeah. Here, I'm just going to put it in the chat because I will not be able to pronounce it well for you. Here we go.
Oh, yeah. You know what? It's probably a hybrid or, a subspecies. It's in the Lamus family, so I would say maybe do a little more research on it. I'm going to Google it right now because I want to look something up about it. If there are any more questions, why don't you go?
If you're not sure too, you can always stick a plant name into Calscape, and that'll tell you if it pops up, or it might say, oh, this is a varietal. This is, you know, only found in nurseries. So that's one way to check on plants like that.
Yeah, its common name is blue wild rye or blue lime grass.
Interesting.
It's funny, they don't state on a lot of these websites whether it's considered native to Southern California, but
Yeah, the follow-up was that it's listed as a European rye, but sometimes called a California native. So there's a debate about if you plant varietals that are cultivars that have been bred for the garden, if that's really considered native. I would say like purists will say no, you have to plant the native that was, you know, originated here and evolved here thousands of years ago for it to be the native species. But since then, garden nurseries and botanists and herbarians and everything have created certain versions of those plants, and it's okay to treat yourself and have those kinds of varieties, I think, as long as you're still staying close to home, still trying to plant what's locally native. It's okay to throw some cultivars in there and have fun with it. Wouldn't be good for your whole garden to be made out of like cultivars that are not really the native originals, but I mean, you're doing a good thing, and it's okay to treat yourself, I think. The one exception would be is if you live next to a native wild space, like if you live next to the Ballona wetlands, and you wanted to plant a buckwheat, you should plant the native buckwheat. You should plant the Seacliff buckwheat, because if you plant a varietal, it could interbreed and potentially reduce the genetic resilience of the plants in the native or in the protected area, in the sanctuary, in the reserve. So just keep that in mind. If you live someplace that's backing up against a native space, if you're going to plant some cultivars, just make sure it's not something that will mix with anything in the native space next to you. So I hope that makes sense.
And just a quick update on the Laemus arniaris. It's native to the coasts of northern and western Europe. A closely related species, Laemus mollis, is native to the northern coasts of North America. So if you can, and you have the choice, try to go native to this area. But some plants from other continents, if they're not invasive and they don't crossbreed with our native plants, they're fine.
Awesome. Getting like real technical this workshop. It's fun. All right, we are at 7 o'clock. So if anybody is still answering or asking a question, just use the raise your hand feature so that we know and we don't cut you off. Here's one question. I live 2 blocks from the Ballona wetlands. Is that close enough to pay attention to specific varieties? I would say so, yeah. Yeah. Yes. Winds, hungry birds, bugs, like that stuff's gonna travel. So if you have any specific questions, you can email me if you want like a plant list. I just helped somebody who's doing something similar. They wanted to make sure they weren't planting anything that was going to crossbreed. And if you live 2 blocks from the wetlands, I highly recommend that you install a native El Segundo blue butterfly garden. If you're anywhere in the 1.5 mile range from the coast between Ballona and the Palos Verdes Peninsula, please use the El Segundo Blue Butterfly portion of the DIY guide and help be a part of us expanding the population enough to delist the federally endangered species and save a species from extinction. That would be awesome. And if you do start planting any native gardens after this, if you're inspired or you're already halfway through or you're just beginning any phase, feel free to Send us pictures, keep us updated, ask questions. We love to know that we're helping to get folks involved in this work, and we love to know how you're progressing, and be here for you if you have questions or need help, or just share how awesome you are. If you have any pictures that you want us to share on social media to help inspire other folks to do what you're doing, we would love that as well.
And Nessa, I just added another event coming up the week of November 16th through the 20th. There's LA's Biodiversity Symposium. My boss, Dr. Eric Strauss, will be a guest speaker, as well as many other experts in the field. So check it out. It's available through Eventbrite. It says there's a charge for it, but I think you can get in for free. So just check it out. You know, a lot of the people that created that biodiversity atlas for LA will be present or will be in the audience or speaking, and that should be very lively and very interesting.
Awesome. All right, thank you so much everyone for coming. Don't forget to check in the chat for all of the links. I'll leave it up for a few minutes for anybody who needs to click on the links. I'm going to put my email address one more time. So if you have any questions, you can, or you want us to look at your plant list, send it to my email and Lisa and I will review. We are also going to think about one of the individuals' very sandy gardens and using native plants to color yarn. So very interesting things that you've left us to think about.
Yes.
So thank you again. And we look forward to hearing from you, and good luck on your gardens, and maybe see you at another Grow Native workshop in the future. And don't forget that Theodore Payne is having its sale the first 3 weeks of November. So they're doing it, usually it's over 3 days, and it's total madness. So I'm actually really happy with this setup where you have 3 weeks, you pick a time slot, you register through their website, and then you don't have to stand in a mile-long line. If anybody else has been there to do that, Lisa and I have been stood in line for over an hour to buy our beautiful plants for just an extra 5% off. So if you're a member, you get 15% off. If you're a non-member, you get 10% off. So it's actually a really great deal. If you're not a member, they only do these sales, I think, 2 or 3 times a year. So take advantage of that. And thanks again, everybody. Thank you for the thank yous, and we appreciate it. All right, thank you. I would also like to thank Lisa for taking the time to join us tonight. I know that you are so busy, and so I really appreciate you.
Pleasure.
Thanks, everybody. All right, happy Thursday, everybody.